Alright, so in the last section we talked about what a database itself is. In this section I want to focus on MySQL, which is a DBMS, or a database management system. So what is MySQL? There's a lot of different definitions. A couple particular definitions that I like is it's a popular open source relational database, and it's powerful, reliable, and scalable. MySQL can also be integrated into web applications written in multiple languages. I would say the most popular being PHP, but you can also integrate Ruby on Rails with Ruby, or Perl. There's just a whole bunch of different languages you can use with MySQL. Some facts. It was created in 1995 by Michael Wideness. It's open source, and the commercial version is free. We'll talk about some of the other editions that are available, but the commercial version runs on a general public license. It is owned by the Oracle Corporation, which is a huge tech company. It's used with the extremely popular LAMP stack, which is basically it's a software package that's used for web applications, which includes Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And there's just a ton of sites that you probably go to every day that run on this LAMP stack. So here are some of the features of MySQL. Alright, so first we have foreign key support. MySQL has a few different storage engines, and if we use the InnoDB storage engine, what foreign key support means is that we can have tables that relate to each other, and we can make it so that, let's say we have a users table and, I don't know, a blog post table. If we delete a user, then all of his blog posts in the blog post table could also be deleted, and that's basically called cascading. We can enable that, or we can make it so that we could keep the blog post even if the user is deleted. Alright, so another feature is trigger. A trigger is a named database object that's associated with a table, and it activates when a particular event occurs for the table. Some uses for triggers are to perform checks of values to be inserted into a table, or to perform other types of calculations on values involved in an update. But we'll learn more about this stuff later. Stored procedures. I'm not going to go over all of these. Full text indexing and searching. Full text indexing allows us basically to run full text queries against character-based data in SQL Server tables. So we could have search and filter functionality in our web applications. Before we can run a full text query on a table, we have to create a full text index on the table, and we will be doing that in an upcoming section. Query caching, replication. MySQL has really good security features, seamless integration with PHP and other web languages. MySQL is available for on 12 different platforms as far as I know. There might be more, but I'm not sure. Obviously we have the most popular Windows, Linux, and Mac, but we can also run MySQL on Novell NetWare, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, Solaris, and then these other ones that I haven't dealt with, HP UX, IBM AIX, QNX, SGI IRX, DEC OSF. Alright, so that's a lot of different letters. But just so you know that it's very MySQL is supported across a whole bunch of different platforms. Alright, so there's a lot of popular usually open source applications that use MySQL. Some of the most popular being Joomla, WordPress, and Drupal, which are all content management systems that run on PHP, MySQL, and Apache. Typo3, PHP PBB, which is a popular forum script, and ModX, and there's just a ton more that use MySQL. Alright, so there's a few different editions or versions of editions, I guess is a better word. We have the Community Edition, which is what we'll be using, which is what is widely used, and that's free, open source, and free. Then we get into the commercial editions, which are extremely expensive, as you can see. The standard edition is 2,000 USD, the enterprise is 5,000, and then the cluster carrier grade edition is 10,000. Alright, so these are for huge website applications and networks. I'm not really going to go into the specifics for these, but the price is determined by the software and support that's given, things like that. And for a full list of features, you can go to this link here, mysql.com/products, and you can check out the different editions. Okay, so MySQL uses a client-server model, and there are three general program categories. Alright, so first we have the server, and that is the MySQL D program, which is basically the only program that actually touches the database. That's the server. So then we have clients, and a client is a program that you can use to communicate and interact with the server. And there are a ton of different clients you can use. The MySQL client, which is a command line program you can use to do whatever, create tables, add data, or whatever. There's also GUI interfaces that you can use, such as MySQL Workbench. PHPMyAdmin is a web-based client. And then you have utilities, and these are usually special purpose programs. An example of this is the MySQL D Safe program, which basically starts up the monitors and monitors the server. And here's a quick diagram that I created just to kind of give you an idea of how the client and servers are set up. So here we have the main MySQL server, which is called MySQL D, and this can have multiple multiple databases we can create on this server. And in the databases, obviously we have our data, which is put in tables. Inside the tables we have rows and columns, and then over here we have our GUI client or our MySQL shell, well, so the command line. So basically whatever we use to run queries or to interact with the server. And then up here we have our HTTP server, which has our PHP scripts, not exclusively PHP, but different scripts such as Joomla, WordPress, and that directly connects to our MySQL server. Alright, so that's a very simple diagram. Alright, so that's it for this section. In the next section I want to get into more into the database terminology and structure. I want to talk about relational databases and give you an example of how tables can relate to each other. Welcome to Chapter 1, Section 1. In this section we're going to talk about what a database actually is. And this may seem like an obvious answer, especially if you have experience with MySQL or any other kind of database. But the reason that I want to start with this is because the term database, it can actually be very vague and it can mean different things to different people. Alright, so the bottom line, the simple, dumbed down definition of a database is an ordered collection of data. Okay, so that doesn't have to be MySQL. It doesn't even have to be a relational database with tables. You could actually have a notepad file with data in that, and that would actually be a flat database. Alright, so it doesn't have to look like MySQL. Usually, when people say the word database, they tend to mean one or more of these three things. And these things are the data, which is the actual data itself, numbers, strings, dates, whatever. The database management system, also called a DBMS, and that is what MySQL is. PostgreSQL, MariaDB, there's a whole bunch of them. That can also be referred to as the database. And then sometimes people might mean the database application, which is the, we could say PHPMyAdmin or MySQL Workbench, just an interface that you use to interact with the data in that database. Okay, so I don't think, in my personal opinion, I don't think that any of these are right or wrong. They could all, in fact, be called the database, in my opinion. Alright, so what I want to talk about is database management systems, which are also called DBMS. And that's what MySQL is. There's a whole bunch of them. A DBMS is software that's designed to model data and provide interaction with a user. Alright, so we can interact with a database management system usually through a command line as well as GUI tools. Alright, so we could actually use something like PHPMyAdmin, which we'll learn about later, where we can create databases and tables and all that. Alright, so data is normally stored in one or more files. These are just some quick facts about DBMS's. Data is usually stored in tables. Alright, so tables contain rows and columns, and this can look much like an Excel spreadsheet or another spreadsheet program, where you have headings, which would be the columns, and then you have rows of data. Alright, and that's looked at as a table. Data can be cross-referenced among tables, alright, and this is true if it's a relational database. And we're going to be talking about relational databases more in this section, so I don't want to get too deep into that. But basically you can relate one or more tables together. And MySQL is probably the most popular relational database that's available. Here are some other popular database management systems. Alright, we have MySQL, obviously. PostgreSQL I've used and is very similar to MySQL in my opinion. SQLite is a little different. You don't actually have a system. It's actually pretty much just a bunch of files, and it's really light. Obviously, that's why it's called SQLite. Microsoft SQL Server, which is pretty much Microsoft's version of one of these, of MySQL. Oracle, which is a big name in relational databases. And over here we have systems that I personally have not used. Alright, we have SAP, Fox Pro, DBase, and MariaDB. And I can't tell you too much about these because I've never used them. But these are just some of the popular management systems that are available. Alright, so I just put together an extremely simple table that you would see inside of a relational database. And like I said, we will be going into this more. We'll create more complicated and in-depth tables, but this is a simple table for, let's say, a customer management system. Alright, so you might have a database called MyStore. Alright, and in that database you have a bunch of tables, and you have a users table. Alright, so that's what this is. This is the users table inside of the MyStore database. Now inside of the users table you have columns, or sometimes called fields, and in this example these fields are ID, first name, last name, and email. And when you create your tables and your columns, you should generally use either this kind of format with lowercase with an underscore separating words, or use camel case, which would be starting with a lowercase, and then the second word would have a capital, and then the third word would have a capital, and so on. So much like JavaScript syntax. And then inside of those columns you have rows, or sometimes called records, or just data. It's the actual data. Alright, so in this table we have 3 users. So we have 3 rows which obviously have an ID, first name, last name, and email. Alright, so that's a very dumbed down example of what a table is. Alright, so interacting with the database, we can do this with what's called a client. Alright, when you install MySQL, it's actually a server. It's a database server, and you can use clients to connect to that database, whether it's locally or remote. And you can do many different things. This is just an example of some common actions that you can run against a database. You could define data, or the actual database and the data inside it. You can create data. You can select certain data, run queries, which does all of this really. You can run select queries, insert, update, delete. Alright, so we can do those things as well. And we can do this to single fields. We can do this to a clump of fields. We can do this to the table, to a column name, all kinds of things. So we can basically do whatever we want with that data. Alright, and the way that we do that in MySQL is through SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. And what it is, it's a special purpose language that allows developers to interact with the data in a database. Alright, so all those things that we just went over, we'll do that through this structured query language. It's based on relational algebra and tuple relational calculus, which I'm not really familiar with. I'm obviously familiar with SQL, but I've never dealt with this relational calculus, so I can't tell you too much more about that. Data definition, and it's a data definition and data manipulation language, and we can perform a lot of different operations, but the most popular being create, read, update, and delete. Alright, and that's for short called CRUD. And let's say you have a blog and you have a post table. Now you'll be able to create posts, alright, to insert into your blog. Read, obviously your blog or website will display the data in the blog to read. You can update a post, and you can also delete a post. Alright, so every resource we create, or every table we create in a database, we can run these operations on. Alright. Common database models. So first we have relational databases, which is the most popular type of database. Obviously MySQL is a relational database. We have object-oriented databases where everything is represented as an object. Object relational databases, distributed databases. We have NoSQL databases like MongoDB. These are much different than MySQL and relational databases. Basically, you don't have to define a schema. It's very lightweight, not as strict, but there's certain things that you don't want to use this type of database for. For instance, if you have an application that performs a lot of different queries and calculations, then you'd want to use something like MySQL. I haven't used these NoSQLs too much. I do have some experience with MongoDB, but that's about it. I haven't used any other ones. Multimedia databases to hold images and videos and all that. Flat database, which is basically just a file. Alright, so you could have just files with data in them. Network database and hierarchical databases. And I haven't used some of these, so I can't really elaborate on them, but basically we'll be focusing on relational databases. Alright, so that's it for just a basic summary of what a database actually is. So in the next video we'll talk about MySQL in general and what it does, what it can offer us, and what it can be used for.